The Meta Center wishes to thank you for purchasing this tape
directly from the Meta Center. Of this lecture presentation is The World Within Series Part 5. Understanding the Unexplainable by Explaining the Understandable. The Worlds Within You. This is a lecture series now where Dr. Blair begins to go inside the body, and there is a series of 2 to 3 more lectures following this one. Remember, our lectures can be purchased by mail order. Also, the Meta Center. This lecture was presented by Dr. Delbert Blair, who is the director of the Meta Center.
The lecture today, this Saturday at the Meta Center, is The World Within Series Part 5. If you've attended or bought the tapes for the previous 4 sessions, then you'll understand how we're moving into Part 5 as we now go with The World Within You. You in the audience here, you that are listening to the tape. And I prefaced it by simply saying, to understand the unexplainable, you explain the understandable. You look at what you can comprehend to understand what is not supposed to be comprehensible, and we find again that as time moves on, everything becomes rivetingly clear. The site of one of the greatest earth pyramids was originally named El Kahira. El Kahira is from the Arabic word called El Kahir, which means Mars. It was so, again, named in the 10th century by the same Pope and those that visited with the Pope that named the continent of Kemet, Africa. A misnomer of one and a true name of the other. There is no such thing as a continent of Africa. It is only Kemet and had many other names, but in fact the old continent at one time was called Ethiopia, and the sea there, which we now call the Mediterranean, was called the Ethiopic Sea. Another time was called Kemet or Kemet. So as we're finding now that we've been lied to in history and about most of the things we've been taught, and if not complete lies, enough distruths and enough misgivings to make most of what we learn have to be subject to scrutiny. To say that it was called Mars, this whole pyramid and the whole plateau, and to find now, which seem in these dissertations and programs that are coming on radio and books that are being published, that the same kind of pyramid structure and the classical Sphinx is now also found in an area called Sedona on Mars, begins to change the concept of what a lot of people have thought before and what a lot of people are thinking. You'll find Africa is going to be in the news for the rest of the year and into the new century. The true name will soon be given, and the areas there of concern will be, of course, Mount Kilimanjaro, Lake Victoria, the Giza Plateau, and the Nile, which was reversed. And they want to understand who and what made the Nile flow backwards and what kind of power could do that. We're going to find soon that the Sphinx on Mars and the Sphinx here in the United States has Negroid features. They were blown off by Napoleon's 8th Grenadiers, of course, here, and there on Mars they rewrote it through the accident that happened with Maldak and Malona, which we talked about extensively last week. To understand this entire presentation today, you need to go back to the series that you may have missed, and we urge you to purchase that as soon as possible. I have here, of course, some pictures that were taken from a number of magazines and a number of books. And one of the pictures I want to show here, of course, is the Pharaoh Tutankhamun, which is on the first of this whole book called Pharaohs. Another one of the pictures comes from another book, Africa's Gift to America, J.A. Rogers, one of the many series. And this particular period shows, again, that the artist's rendition in Napoleon's 1798 expedition shows, of course, the black-looking Sphinx, all right, before they desecrated it. On the other side, again, you see the Sphinx, Negroid-looking, and then the restorations, and so as they actually go up to supposedly restore even what was already defaced. They understand quite well that the pyramid and Sphinx were not built at the same time. We've been mistold, of course, it was all part of the same structure. It was not. The pyramid could have been built anywhere from 1500 BC to 15,000 BC to 11,000 BC. That would be the pyramid. The Sphinx was built anywhere from about 10,800 BC to 8,700 BC. Neither of those represent the 2,680 BC that the Spanish Petrie and others have misguided and told us it was probably built there. I have here just a couple of the stone sections to see the tonnage that is used in the Sphinx. There's some 2,500,000 blocks of stone in the pyramid alone. Of that, there are 6 granite giants which weigh close to 300 tons each. And there are close to 1.5 million that weigh anywhere from 75 to 150 tons. No men moving gangplanks and ropes and mules or whatever else again and pulling back they ever built that. We've heard my tape on that. If you haven't, just go get any of the tapes I have on the Great Pyramid. Obviously now the technology used was tremendous. And the same technology now that they're finding on Mars, of course, has sent a red bell alert all over the planet for people, of course, who don't want people who make Sphinx that look like Negroids to be capable of such that, or to be idolated so that somebody still went to all that trouble to make it look like them. Either way, it's a no-no. It's a yes for me because it's what I believed in for a long time. It's why I never got tenure and why I walked away or got fired just as a man did for many a job and many a school position. And since I said I was not going to lie to any young mind that I was trying to reach, why I went on my own. So it's a heavenly day for me, but I also know what precludes this and also follows this, and so that I'm not too happy about. But we'll be getting into all of that now, if you will. On the sheet, of course, as we are going to take a very long look at that whole idea of the Sphinx and the whole idea of the pyramid itself, the story stated that on top of the Great Pyramid, which again is a 4-sided, again, equilateral triangle, there was a capstone. And the capstone was made of either gold or some precious metal that resembled gold, and it had within it the Eye of Horus, which represented, of course, the all-seeing eye. It meant that there was a golden cap to all of that structure, and it was a huge crystal within that, and that was a power unit. That was the top power unit, which would balance the other power unit that was hidden under the ground. So when they took that away, the pyramid no longer functions. And this is why it was referred to as a tomb. No one was ever buried there purposely. It was never an entombment for Khufu, Microninus, or anyone else, or Cheops, if they mispronounced it as the Greeks did. It was simply, again, a structure. It was a dynamic generator and a telescope, an observatory all in one, and even a landing coordinate, or like you might say, a control tower. Once they took away that part, it no longer functioned as it could. And so therefore, we've had vestiges of a mighty structure that some very intelligent life force had obviously built. When it's restored, and when it begins to work again, it will cancel out all energies on the planet Earth as far as using electricity, because it will generate directly from the sun, which is now becoming magnetic, which means electricity will not work into the year 2000, into the millennium. Electricity is the thing that has held most people back here. It's a cause of radiation and poison, and it must go. Magnetism will replace it. In a sense, that's saying that spirituality will replace pragmatism. And this is why you're having such a battle now that's going on. People that are very pragmatic, materialistic, and people who are very spiritual and want the magnetic frequencies to do things with the mind that they used to do, but the power was taken away because the power represents the skull of man. Now, when I say the skull of man, you must understand something else, so we'll be getting into that next week. The skull of man does not mean the skull of human, does not mean the skull of womb man, does not mean the skull, again, of mankind. It means the skull of man, just that. Man being a group of people that were given the planet Earth as a habitat to see if they could work out their problems and procreate again into a new consciousness. This whole story, of course, was taken away, as it was talked about in many cases, through the Bible. And when the new religion of Christianity was given to people, and that's exactly what it was, a new religion of Christianity, and I hope I'm not stepping on some feelings, but you're going to have lots of feelings stepped on in the next 2 years. What I'm simply doing is to tell you the truth as I understand it. I wouldn't lie to you knowingly. And as I've always said, if you find where I told a lie, come back and tell me, because I run my mouth too much now on many stations and so on like this, and I want to change that and do something about it. The capstone of the Great Pyramid represents the skull fissure of mankind and the skull itself of man. As we know, when we're born, and we'll get into more of this next week again, the skull sutures, and the hole that was at the top now closes. And that's when the little soul now gets illumination. They now have the 5 senses, but they've lost 3 other senses at that point. They become captured, if you would. And the gland that sits most near the top of the skull is the pineal gland. The pineal gland is your master gland, which was always shown as a uraeus when you see the great pharaohs again. Uraeus, of course, represents the little serpent or snake that sticks out from the forehead on a kippah of most of the figures, again, of the pharaohs that we see. There are usually two, one being a hawk, again, like figure, and a cobra, and then the other small. Represents, again, wave. Serpents have waves and coils. Represents energy coming and going. The ability to be psychic and yet grounded and pragmatic at the same time. A duality of man. The duality of man is not found in human. Human is engrafted man, the beast man, the animal man. This one represents an awakened consciousness in the use of power, and therefore they were looked at as pharaohs or rulers. The Pharaohs, of course, is what their names were, but they were called pharaohs, again translated by the Greeks. We again say many words that are not correct, but we've been mistaught. Being mistaught, they're not blamed because, again, of ignorance, because it is those who knew the truth and didn't tell that would be the blame. We look even more so into this whole idea of the capstone and the Sphinx, and we find that the pyramid within our own bodies is very much alive and working. But the two units that make it work best is the pineal gland, which is a big crystal. It takes in light during the daytime and reflects it back at night, especially between the hours of 10:30 and 2:30 on the natural cycle, not daylight saving times and other cycles again, the natural cycle. And again, as we have told you many times, why we like the noni juice, because it will continue to titillate that pineal gland and have it begin to work through the pituitary gland, which works through all the other organs and glands, which keep us seated in a body, functioning in this car or truck that we call our body, and make it function correctly so you can hit all gears. Without that, you're either going in reverse, you're going in half gear, half speed, you can't accelerate too well. Within the pyramid itself, of course, they talked about the Grand Gallery, and the Grand Gallery was supposedly a large entranceway in the pyramid that went up the side, as you possibly can see from there, and this huge opening there up to what is called the King's Chamber, which is a 5-layered column, of 4 columns and, of course, 5 layers, over above the sepulcher, which, of course, was beneath it, and which the pharaoh was said to have been buried. Well, as I stated, they never used this for a tomb. Nobody was buried there, period. If they were there, it's because they failed and died, but not because they were buried there. What this represents, of course, is a huge generator, a cyclotron, if you will, and one of the byproducts of that was to clean what is called the electromagnetic field and make you well and whole. It got rid of any conditions within your body as a byproduct. This was not its main function. It was just one of the things you did when you had some time to do while you were working at the Great Pyramid, bringing in spaceships and coordinating things in the underworld and all like this. It's just like you might say a spa, if you would. No more, no less. Crystals used to line the Grand Gallery. When all these crystals were in place and the sound resonance was hit, it would send out light and sound through the 2 shafts at different times of the grade, or depending on who they were trying to contact, how far they had to send the signal. And, of course, for people to work in here, they had to be very synchronated. Their bloodstream had to be well. They had to have high vibrations, because just the tone itself would drive some people out of their mind if their brains were more practical, and if you want to call it pragmatic, and their occipital lobe was not developed enough. So it automatically tells you the kind of people that had to work in this and the conditions that they had to work under again. The sepulcher was one where it was not made for a body at all. It was made for a unit, which has come to be known as the Ark of the Covenant. There are 8 such units still on the planet Earth. 2 of them now are tried to be possessed by the Jewish people, who have not been successfully able to do anything with it. The one that still remains is in Ethiopia. But that's also a pundit, because Ethiopia used to be the name of the entire continent. So you must understand that it was rightfully thus that the people there would still have it, and no one else could make it work anyway. And it can't work again till the capstone is in place and certain resonances on all the planets that, again, have Negroid-looking people now begin to function back in this system. It is not that Negroid-looking people are so great. Please don't misunderstand me. It's because, again, they were generally the surface people and the people that could go from the underworld to the surface because of melanin. And that's why melanin and melanin research is so prime. And I, again, caution you about giving up your melanin very easily through these shots and spinal taps. It's one of the worst things you could do at this time. Always have to throw that in. If you have it, you've been blessed. Use your blessing well. It's been a long fight to get you to understand what that blessing is worth. When we're also looking in at the idea of what's now going on, you must understand that this story has been told and retold many cases. And I'm not going to get into a long thing on this, I have a whole complete tape called The True Story of Christianity. But the so-called Christian fathers in 325 AD met and created the whole religion that we now come to know of Christianity. What they displaced or replaced was the ancient religion again of the oneness of man and all of the creations, the fact that we are in classrooms, the fact that we are sometimes fought over, and that this planet was set aside as a very particular planet where all the different groups of people in life could see if they could live in harmony. Obviously, that has failed. But one of the things that was done was to show that these great souls that thought that they understood what they could do and knew their power, to see what could be done if they were had power taken away, and power was given to those who had no power. To see again if people could actually live in harmony when they were equal. And of course, the equality of all of that was still unequal because melanin was not granted to everybody, which limited where they could travel on the planet without getting sick, without getting imbalanced, without getting diseased, and out of balance again. Melanin automatically lets you travel anywhere on the surface of Earth and even into the interior Earth in perfect balance. Because when it is functioning correctly, it causes a higher vibration to be secreted through the pituitary gland to all of the organs and glands and hormones in the body, and you automatically adjust. We'll find soon that as we travel wherever in the galaxy or in the cosmos, it's a matter of not how you get someplace. That's easy. It's a matter of adjusting once you get there to bring that reality in sequence. Other than that, you're aborted. And this is the whole key. Vibrations and resonance. Vibrations and resonance. We've been taught only vibrations. The key behind vibration is resonance. Resonant frequency, if you will. The crucifixion, as was being given by the Passion Plays and by Easter, which was just honored, of course, a couple of weeks ago, was that Jesus the Christ, or the Christ, Christos, the Anointed One, was crucified. And of course, many things were said about the crucifixion, but at the crucifixion, there were between two thieves who asked one day again, and he said supposedly that one day or this day you will ascend with me into heaven. Even though there had been thieves and robbers and all like this, the crucifixion was a harsh way to explain about it again. And of course, he was crucified, of course, in the land of Golgotha, to the mountain of Golgotha, and you know the rest of the story. I won't bore you with that story again. But you must understand the metaphysical resonance of that metaphor. All things that we are taught was on 7 levels. Everything that we learn is on 7 levels. We're only going to hit about the first 3, so to understand there are even more meanings behind this. 7 levels for everything here on this planet. 7 stages of consciousness, 7 understandings. Take one if you want, but don't believe that that's the ultimate, because there's too many mansions in the Father's house and too many things that we need to learn. To understand the crucifixion, you must understand another principle, and that principle is symbolized in the caduceus. And the caduceus is simply, again, the idea that man is seated in the chamber of life, and that the 2 robber serpents, if you will, the 2 robber thieves, found on each side of the crucifixion, simply represent the Ida Pingala pneumogastric nerves and all that goes with it. Simply, again, those that send the energy upward, refraining from sex, refraining from fighting and animalistic activity, which produces a fluid which then goes into the medulla stem, and the other nerve center, if you will, on the right side, simply sending it back down again so man cannot ascend. The 16th vertebra represents again where the fluid changes and represents the power that man has latent within him again. To find again the pyramid and the Sphinx on the same plateau at Giza simply shows that the people understood exactly what they were doing, exactly what they were building, and understood the metaphysical as well as the very practical, something that everyone alive on earth now is supposed to do, to understand the pragmatism, materialistic concept, but to have enough power and spirituality to still bring out the other portions of one's nature. Close your eyes as a group. Then I want you to keep them closed until I ask you to open them again. By doing this, we all will be in sync and coordinated. And then I'm going to ask you a question when you open your eyes, and please